The deadlift, one of the hardest lifts to do. It's one of the three movements in powerlifting. You got the squat, the bench. The very last event is the deadlift. Why is the deadlift so tough? What's the issues with the deadlift that make it hard to do, hard to perform? And then we'll talk about the number one issue people have with their deadlift and how they can improve their efforts. What is the deadlift? The deadlift is when you load the barbell on the floor and you gotta pick it up to lock out, whether in a conventional stance with your feet hip width apart or your feet in sumo position, which is a wider stance outside your hips. And with the deadlift, oftentimes it's poorly executed because it's a single phased movement. That's what makes it different than the squat and the bench. On the squat and bench, you have two phases, the downward phase and the upward phase, when you descend and ascend. And our muscles, when they contract, they correspond to that. So the muscle will stretch first. That's called the eccentric phase when it loads. So all that stretching causes tension. And that tension, because our muscles are elastic, builds energy so that when they do shorten during the desirable phase of a movement, when they shorten, they have all this energy from the stretch. Now, when they shorten, you have all this energy to redirect, put into the barbell, and make you feel stronger than ever. So I don't know if you've ever thought about it before, but pull-ups, when you pull from a dead position and pull up, you're skipping that stretching phase. You're going straight from a resting phase to a shortening phase. So you don't have any elastic buildup of energy like you would like on a squat or a bench. So that's why sometimes when people do pull-ups, they actually start from the top. So then when they come down, their muscle stretches and now they get that benefit. Now with the deadlift, it's the same thing. When you pull it off the floor, you get no stretch, no load, no elastic potential of energy. You're going from a rested state to a shortened stage. That's the eccentric phase. That's when the muscles shorten. So when you pull the deadlift, you don't get to stretch the muscle. You're at a huge disadvantage, which makes me argue that the deadlift might be harder than the squat or the bench. But regardless of all this information, we know that the deadlift is a very delicate movement. And there's one big thing that you're doing right now that's probably messing up your deadlift, and that's your hip position. The number one issue for any deadlifter is their hip position. A lot of times people will have their hips too high or too low. And a lot of it comes from the fact that people think when they deadlift, they're squatting the weight. There's a cue that a lot of people talk about. They say, leg press the weight off the floor. But when you leg press, your hips are going up and down. Actually, in fact, when you leg press, your hips are going nowhere. It's your legs that are moving everywhere. But regardless, some people drop their hips so low that when they start to pull, their hips come up, their shoulders fall forward, they lose posture, they're in a weakened position, and then they don't get the lift. So hip positioning is very important with the deadlift. Here's how I would suggest fixing your hip positioning. Imagine you're coming down to the bar, but don't let your hips come straight down. Let them go down and backwards. Calling that a hinge. So your hips need to go backwards and down, because when that happens, that keeps your shins upright. Here's the problem. If you squat down to the bar, your knees will lean forward, making your shin fall forward. And everything we do in lifting is math. So if your shins are leaning forward, they're not at an upright position, 90 degrees to the floor. That's a weakened position. In lifting, we want to desire to have between 90 to 100 degrees to be the strongest we are possible within any given contraction. So if you squat down too low, the knees fall forward, the shins lean forward. Now you're talking about the knee joint being more vulnerable in a deadlift. And you want to make sure that you're recruiting the hip joint mostly in the deadlift, because that's the strongest joint in the body. So one of the biggest issues, all right, let me start over. The biggest issue with deadlift is hip positioning. People are too high or too low because they think they have to squat the weight. So make sure you understand that when you do the deadlift, let your hips come down, but also backwards and hinge into the bar. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by that, like I told you before, there is no stretching phase of a deadlift. So here's a couple tips that I can recommend for you guys to improve your deadlift and its hip positioning. Number one, start doing eccentric deadlifts. What that means is pick a lower weight lift the bar off the floor, try to use good mechanics, but record yourself and do deadlifts floating afterwards, but really focus on the eccentric phase. So coming down, let your hips go backwards, come down slow, don't touch the floor, stand up. Come down slow, don't touch the floor, stand up. When you do those eccentric deadlifts where you get to come down and stretch the muscle, you'll start to see the body's mechanics where it naturally wants to be in the strongest position possible. So I have a lot of my lifters do that eccentric deadlifts just to learn how to position themselves on the bar and how to be better at the deadlift. And another tip, do more sets, do less reps. The reason why you should do that is because now you're practicing your first rep strength. So instead of doing 3 sets of 6, flip it, do 6 sets of 3. So you're always working on that first rep strength and getting better from that position. If you have more questions, just leave a comment below. Like the channel, subscribe, ask questions. We're here to help, make you better, and we hope you enjoyed the video today.